Hi, I'm Yaakov Katz, and welcome to another episode of the Jewish People's Podcast by JPPI, now focused on the ongoing war between Israel and Iran. And today, I'm privileged to be joined by Ambassador Mike Herzog. Ambassador Herzog served as Israel's ambassador to the United States from end of 2021, November, until January of this year, just a few months ago. But prior to that, not only does he have a unique insight and expertise, of course, on the Israel-U.S. relationship and what to expect now from the Trump administration and what's happening. But Ambassador Herzog is not just an ambassador, he's also a former Brigadier General, retired from the IDF, served for many years in high-level intelligence roles in the Israeli military, and also as the chief of staff to Israel's defense minister, Ehud Barak, back in the years during which Israel also had once upon a time planned to attack Iran's nuclear program. So Ambassador Herzog, thank you so much for joining me today. And I'll jump straight into it. This war or operation, whatever we want to call it, has been going on now for just about two and a half days. It seems that Israel has been successful, definitely at neutralizing Iranian air defense systems, degrading to some extent the Iranian ballistic missile capability, and starting to take out the nuclear infrastructure. How do you see where we are at this point and what we should expect going forward?
So thank you for hosting me. It's a pleasure to be on your podcast. And let me give some background or context to what's happening right now in this war with Iran. One might say that this is the last chapter in the war that started on October 7th. The war was started by Hamas, an Iranian proxy, but it will not be completed until we deal with Iran itself, what people here in Israel call the head of the snake. So the first question to ask is why and why now? And I think it's born out of a combination of both necessity and opportunity. The necessity because of the very dangerous point that the Iranian nuclear program has gotten to. Iran has become essentially a nuclear threshold state in terms of its enrichment program, mastering the fuel cycle. And it developed the delivery systems, namely the missiles. And what we've seen over the last few months is Iran also advancing towards weaponization. We're not sure that a decision was taken to rush to the bomb, but what Iran was doing is R&D that was supposed to shorten the time if and when it takes a decision to go for the bomb. At the same time, Iran basically rejected the U.S. effort to reach a nuclear deal that would block its way to a weapon. And we've seen a recent report by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, after having after 20 years of not saying so, and now saying that Iran is in non-compliance with its obligation under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT. So that created the necessity because the Iranian program has gotten to a very dangerous point. The amount of enriched uranium they amassed was sufficient to ultimately produce at least 15 bombs, if not more. And the amount of 60% enriched uranium that they had would be sufficient to a number of bombs, and no country enriching to 60% had civilian purposes for its program. And they could, within days, enrich uranium to military grade sufficient for one bomb. So this was getting out of hand, and there was no sufficient monitoring. Second, there was a rare opportunity, a unique opportunity created by Israel turning the tables on the Iranian axis in this war, beginning last September, a combination of the very significant degradation of Hezbollah in Lebanon. Remember, Hezbollah was built as a shield to the Iranian nuclear program. The fact that we managed to hit very significant parts of the Iranian air defense, the S-300, and then the collapse of Syria and the subsequent taking out of their air defense system, which was also part of a shield to the Iranian strategic capabilities, all of it created a rare opportunity. What we've seen over the last few months is Iran rushing to close this gap, to close this window of opportunity, and to harden its nuclear facilities to the point where neither Israel nor the United States would be able to destroy it militarily. So, and on top of that, I would also add the fact that the U.S. administration was on board. Israel did not act without prior understanding with the Trump administration. That gave Israel some tailwind in order to carry out this operation. The element of surprise was critical, and because of that strategic surprise, Israel thwarted the Iranian plans to either preempt an Israeli strike or to respond massively once we carry out this strike. So the opening moves in this war have been very positive for Israel and gave Israel an advantage. What we see Israel doing since it launched this war is focusing on four groups of targets. The first group is that of top defense leadership, which wreaked havoc, created chaos, and disrupted their decision-making process in terms of how they respond to Israel and what they do. The second was nuclear targets, nuclear facilities, and nuclear scientists, which is a core of this operation. The third was their air defense capabilities, so that Israel enjoys freedom of flight, free skies. We are essentially there in between Western Iran, which is closer to Israel, and Tehran. Still work to be done, but for the first time, Israel can fly freely to Iran and over Iranian skies and do what he wants to do. And this is something very significant. We're talking about targets 1,500 kilometers away, over 1,000 miles. This is not something minor. It's very, very significant. And we are now operating over Iran on a daily basis as if we're flying over Beirut. This is very significant. And the fourth group of targets is their ground-to-ground missiles, their ballistic missiles, which are the main Iranian weapon to hit Israel. And we estimate that when this war was launched, they had around 2,000 missiles, and they were about to enhance their capacity to produce. We hit them hard in October, but within a few years, they would have developed a huge arsenal, unbearable in terms of their ability to hit Israel, and which is also part of the calculation of why to do it now. And Israel is now focusing on degrading their ballistic missile arsenal so as to minimize their ability to hit Israel. We've seen the damage that could be done by these missiles over the last few nights, but they don't have huge numbers to drag in Israel into a very long, protracted war of attrition in terms of their missile capacity, but they can still inflict damage. So the opening, yes,
what is the definition of success here, right? I was trying to think about what's the definition of success. So if I go back and look at prior models of the bombing of Iraq in 81, the bombing of Al-Kibar in Syria in 2007. In both cases, we were talking about single facilities completely destroyed and basically removing the ability for them to rebuild. There's the interesting tale of 81 that Israel wasn't sure that it would delay them more than a year, but it ended up stopping Saddam in his tracks. But here in this case, the Iranians have the technical knowledge. It's domestic. They don't rely on the North Koreans or the French. They can rebuild if they want. So how would you define success if you were asked that?
So it's an important question, and I would say the goal in this case is to destroy the main components, the critical components of the Iranian nuclear program to the point that they cannot go underground and rush to the bomb. I mean, the biggest concern about any military strike, you mentioned Israeli dilemmas back in 2010, 2011, 2012, and later on, I was part of some of these discussions. And one of the big dilemmas always was not the operation itself, but the days after and the years after. And the concern that what Iran might do is take its residual capabilities after the Israeli strike, kick out the inspection, abandon the NPT, go underground, and rush to the bomb.
And race to the bomb, right?
Yeah. So I think the measure of success here is the ability to take out all those critical elements in their nuclear program, and there are not many. I mean, it's a huge program. It's not one facility or one reactor like we had in Iraq or in Syria. It's different, but still, there are critical elements that if you take them out, they're unable to pursue this scenario of rushing to the bomb, going underground. It'll take them time. The knowledge is there. The political will may be there, but it will push them back for many, many years, and you can always follow up with international pressure. Now, this is a challenge. It's a challenge. It's an operational challenge, and it is a strategic challenge. And I do believe that in this case, Israeli U.S. cooperation and coordination is critical. The U.S. has some capabilities that we do not have, but beyond the operations side, there is a strategic day after, making sure that there's sufficient pressure applied on Iran after this strike so that they cannot resume or reconstruct their program. And I'm hopeful that we'll see more and more of that cooperation. Right now, the U.S. is standing with us. It is articulated public support for what Israel is doing, stood with us in defense. There is a SAD battery here in Israel participating in our defenses, and I hope to see a bigger role in both defense and potentially also offense. Right now, the fact that we have degraded the Iranian air defense should and opens more space for other parties to participate in this effort.
So, before we talk, I want to go further with you about the U.S. Role here. But just before that, I mean, if we take out those key components, like you mentioned, so let's talk about Natanz, Isfahan, Fordo, Parchin, whatever the different facilities are. Some of them are already significantly damaged. Some of them require a little bit more kinetic damage that need to be done. But let's assume we get that done. Although there are some questions about Fordo exactly operationally, I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you how it would be done, because that's probably something we shouldn't be talking about anyhow. But let's say we do that. To stop them from rebuilding, you need that international mechanism or something, right? You need America, right? So what does that look like? What's that off ramp?
So the U.S. administration is talking about resuming negotiations with Iran. Understandably, they hope that a weakened Iran will go back to the table, and then you can have a deal on better terms. I think right now this is unrealistic because given the blow, not only to the Iranian capabilities, but to their national pride, they are being humiliated as we speak. So it is very unlikely that the current Iranian leadership will just cave in and say, okay, we are raising a white flag and we are going back to the negotiating table. It's not going to happen, not before they feel they've tipped the balance, and they are trying to do so unsuccessfully for now, but they are trying. So I understand that hope, and the big question is what other options for an exit strategy exist. But ultimately, I believe, assuming Israel or maybe Israel and the U.S. succeed in taking out the Iranian nuclear program and pushing them back many, many years, there ought to be some kind of a diplomatic outcome or an exit to this war. It is not in our interest to have an open-ended or endless war with Iran. But the more we degrade them, I think the more options there are ultimately for a day after. There's also the question of the internal situation in Iran. Some people in our system are hopeful that this will trigger an internal process that will ultimately bring about the fall of this regime.
On that point, you believe, sorry, go ahead.
I believe that historically this regime is not going to survive because essentially, and I've been following domestic scene in Iran very closely for a long time. It seems to me that the regime lost the people. The majority of the people in Iran are against the regime. How this plays out and translates itself, no one knows. I mean, it could take a long time until this regime falls.
Oh, no. So I wanted to ask you, do you think that Israel, which has been focused on military leadership, not civilian leadership, should be targeting also civilian leadership then?
I would make the following distinction. In terms of strategy to topple the regime, this is a very slippery slope. It's everybody who try to deal with regime change. History is full of examples of
Yeah.
failed attempts. The U.S. failed, Israel failed in Lebanon, and others failed as well. I do believe this calls for a long-term strategy. It's not a short-term strategy where you have to invest in this and deepen the divide between the regime and the people. But it's not a short-term strategy that can play out perhaps during the course of this, immediate war. It is a long-term strategy that we have to pursue. Some people in Israel believe that the blows to the Iranian regime are such that might ultimately bring about internal strife and may ultimately topple the regime. It's not something you can bet on.
Yeah.
It's not something you can bet on.
100%. So I want to let you go, Ambassador, but I do want to just go back to what you were speaking about U.S. involvement. I mean, there was clearly, and you said this, there was that coordination between Israel and the Americans. We needed to surprise the Iranians, and the Americans worked with Israel on making that possible. America did try 5 rounds of negotiations led by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff with the Iranians to try to get to a deal. That did not succeed. Will we see now? The president was with us, right? He was with us until the attack. He took a nice victory lap himself, did a lot of interviews on Friday because it went well. So why not take some credit? But now he tweeted the other day that just this morning, I think, about his conversation with President Putin, who called from Russia, who called him to wish him happy birthday and said, we should wrap this up. So if he wants to wrap it up and he doesn't want to get involved and he's warning the Iranians not to attack American assets, so then he's not forced to get involved. Can Israel somehow convince him to get involved? Because I think everyone here knows, no secret, they just got to send a couple B-2 bombers and, game over here.
So this really is the big question. I will say it's a complicated picture with many nuances. It is not that from the first moment the Trump administration was with Israel, coordinated with Israel, and pushing Israel or greenlighting an Israeli strike. That's not exactly the case. They preferred diplomacy. They gave diplomacy a chance. At the same time, to be fair, they did give a specific time frame, 60 days. And as you know, Israel hit on day 61. And President Trump even acknowledged that. So it's not that from the beginning they were together with us, kind of misleading the Iranians, leading them to believe that nothing is going to happen, while scheming with us behind the scenes that Israel will strike. I think that happened only in the last few days. The big question for us is to what extent America will stand with us, not only in defense, but potentially also beyond that, to complete the job on the Iranian nuclear facilities, because they can do a better job than we can. It's not that we cannot, but they can do a better job and a faster job. And it's an open question. I do not feel, and I base this on conversations with people in the U.S. administration. I don't feel an appetite to join in the war, to be part of an offensive war against Iran. I hope that they will be willing to do more defensively with us and to deter Iran from escalating this war further. But in terms of America itself being part of this war, right now, I do not feel the appetite. But let's see. I don't rule out that with time and more Israeli successes and the impression of the fact we took out major air defense, Iranian air defense capabilities, and the fact that we are gradually degrading their missile capabilities, which would strike back at Israel and possibly American targets, hopefully that could convince the U.S. administration that what is at stake is not only in Israeli interest, but also U.S. interest, because it's in the interest of the free world that Iran will be denied nuclear capabilities.
And that is ultimately the main objective here, which I think what we really need, and this is what I've been telling people, is the most important asset or resource right now is time to get the mission done. And if Israel has the time, it'll likely be able to achieve that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to tie this conversation to where I started. Basically, this is like the last act in what started on October 7th. And the significance of October 7th is not only the fact that Hamas surprised us and hit us very hard with all the atrocities that we all know about. It is because the whole Iranian axis followed Hezbollah and the Houthis and Shiite militias in Iraq and Syria. And ultimately, Iran itself hit Israel twice in April and in October. And consider, Iran never engaged Israel directly. They always fought us to the last proxy. And here they were striking Israel directly. Why? Because of October 7th, because they believed that Israel deterrence was eroded, that Israel is weaker, that Israel is more vulnerable. And now we're in a process where we've turned the table on the whole Iranian axis. Now we are targeting Iran itself. This is a decisive, a crucial struggle that will determine our future and the stability of the region. And I believe it is in the interest not only of Israel, but also of other nations and the United States that we will complete the job successfully. This will make a better, safer world.
And by the way, just on that point, there's total political consensus also in Israel. You know, in a country that's so politically divided, even all the opposition heads are, you know, except for maybe the Arab parties, are totally supportive of this move. So it's so broad, the consensus. Ambassador Herzog, I want to thank you so much for joining me and for your insight on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to all our listeners, and keep tuned as we stay tuned as we come back with more episodes and updates on the